Andrew Turner is here to be an ambassador to some people who have some thoughts on that. So please welcome Andrew.
Hi. So, yeah, obviously for a long time, my kind of passion has been trying to build technology that actually makes a change in place. And a couple years ago, I went and wrote a book called Introduction to Neogeography, which we're actually worked with Hartley, and we're actually going to be releasing under Creative Commons license, so open sourcing the book itself to try and connect these technologists with people who actually want to do mapping and build tools. So I was very fortunate to get asked to help kind of act as an intermediary with Hillary, Rachel, and Marnie, thank you, they have a lot of really kind of very interesting ideas on what the implications are and the technology is that kind of inform location-based services around its effect on places and communities. So I'll leave it to them to, Rachel's going to kind of talk through it, and then they're each going to present their kind of viewpoints. As part of my ambassador role, I'm going to be accepting any questions on IRC or Twitter via the hashtag #PlaceChange. So anything you want to kind of ask of the panel or any ideas or suggestions, definitely throw it up here, and I'll make sure that the panel kind of ponders it and talks about it.
Thanks, Andrew. So we work together in a side project to the normal work that we do together at Ground. Stowe Boyd asked us to get involved with this, and Ground is a project that's about localism as a global movement. And we each approach it from slightly different angles. I normally work with lots of nonprofits and think a lot about food all the time. So I'll be talking a little bit today about sustainable food movement and place. And Marnie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Marnie Webb, and as Rachel said, we're working together on this the Ground project. I spend my daytime hours working on helping nonprofits figure out how to use technology to achieve whatever change it is they're after. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how you connect communities and how you bring communities together with the direct purpose of creating some kind of change, and how you get the social benefit organizations working on those things to expose their data so it can get integrated with all the other things that are out there, so you can actually understand what you're trying to change a lot better.
I'm Hillary Hartley. I work with a company called NIC. We do e-government for 21 states. So I kind of come at this from a not necessarily political, but definitely a government-tinged background, and think a lot about that.
You do have a bit of a government tinge to you. So data is being collected like crazy.
So one of the things when we started thinking about this is what information do people need to be able to access? And we were really coming at this from the perspective of how are all of these mobile and location technologies changing our conception of home and place? So when we started thinking about the data that people have available to them, we were thinking about sort of the passive kind of environmental data that's just collected, telling you what temperature it is, or pollutants in the area, or all of those kinds of things. Also, the data that's being collected as we go about our lives, the fact that if you have a zip card, it always knows where you are, you know? Or if you use your ATM card, or if you use Fast Track to pay a toll. You're not sort of trying to say, here I am, but in fact, that's what you're saying when you're doing those actions. And then lastly, the applications, where we are saying, here I am, you know, like I'm checking in on Brightkite, or I'm posting a mobile photo, or something like that. And so then let's just breeze through the next three here. So then we started thinking about how you can use those to say, who am I near, both physically, but also is there a way for me to be more connected to the people that I'm not near physically for some reason? And tell me more about the place that I'm in. And then finally, tell me more about the impact I'm having, both on the place that I'm in, but also places that I'm not. So one of the things that happens, of course, there's a site called ilovemountains.org, right? And you put in your zip code, and it ends up giving you a picture of the mountaintop that you are slowly removing because of the place where you're buying your power, right? So it's connecting you to the sort of offset impact of your environmental choices. And then because we're nerds, we found it necessary to repeat all of that on another slide.
Just to review.
the question of what is home in all of this and how we stay connected to home, I think, is an important one. I also, for me, this means a lot because I travel a lot. And I'm not always home, and yet I try to stay connected. And there are location-based and new tech that sort of helps us do that. But I think the bigger question is sort of about home and community. And communities are defined somewhat arbitrarily, if you think about it. Maybe it's by the school board, or maybe it's by the Chamber of Commerce. So we have these defined boundaries of community often. But when I think of community, and I think when a lot of people in our sphere think of community, we now have this kind of fuzzy definition of it that really brings in technology and brings in the web. And so there's technology, and there are networks online and services that allow us to really define our own communities. Even old technology. Think about bulletin boards and how you maybe rooted yourself in very firmly in a community on a bulletin board. You know, parents, even still today, are using very basic old technology bulletin boards to talk with each other about the school system that they're in or about their kids and connect with each other that way. And then, as Marnie mentioned, there's Brightkite, there's Foursquare, there's Looped, there's, you know, I mean, this thing in my phone is just communicating all day. I've had several pings since I've been here of other people, you know, people in the audience saying, ping, I'm here, you know, and I just said it, ping, I'm here. So we are sort of constantly both intelligently and implicitly defining our community. Today, you are my community. So that definition is very, I guess, mashable and mashed up. It's really mobile. It's very networked. And I think it sort of brings more meaning to it, becomes more meaningful. And I'll let you guys sort of talk a little bit about, I don't know if any of you have seen or read about the concept of the big here, but you know, we have access in a very real way to oral history, but we also now have immeasurable access to kind of an archived history of our home. You know, if I want to find out exactly what my house is sitting on, if it's bedrock or liquefaction, I can find that out. If I want to know what birds are migrating, I can find that out very easily. Because of the technology and the internet, in fact. So knowledge, I think, makes us feel more connected. Even something like Yelp. If I'm at home, I can explore my neighborhood in a new way, and pinpoint things that maybe are more special to me.
Yeah, and the concept of home and local has changed a lot for me in the past 2 years. In part because I live on a really organized block. So at the same time that my concept of local has been growing, it's also been focusing and shrinking in some ways. But the low-tech thing that my block does that keeps it all together is a listserv. But my block has a listserv, and it's very active. I know all about what's going on with the sewer this week.
So is the listserv the new bulletin board system? Is it just as good? What happens to the, so I'm going to start poking in here, is what happens if you've changed the barrier to entry too? People don't have to come to the bulletin board system anymore, so anyone can join that listserv. And what's the effect when you have external players playing into a potentially very local community?
Yeah, we actually have, it's a closed listserv.
Okay.
It actually took me 6 months to get on it.
So how do you prove your identity to a local community? Do they have to come by and see your house or something?
You get invited to join the listserv by a piece of mail at your door. It's very silly. But at the same time, my concept of local has really been expanding and getting much bigger. I've been paying a lot of attention to what food I eat and how close it is to me, and have been introduced to the concept of a food shed. We're all very familiar with watersheds, but I think food shed is something that is kind of new and emerging. Deeply tied into that is environmental impacts. And referring back to the website that Marnie talked about, I Love Mountains enables me to see not only the impacts that I'm having, but the impacts that my neighbors are having in terms of energy use and mountaintop removal. And now we come to my favorite part. There are 3 iPhone apps that are actually data sets available a couple of different ways, but I'll just talk about the iPhone apps that are really fun. The first one is Locavore. It's an app that's relatively new. It's only about 5 weeks old. 9 weeks old. And Locavore is an app, an iPhone app, where you can figure out what vegetables and produce are in season and local to you. We looked today. I'm hot after sour cherries because I like making pies with them. They're not in season yet, which I know because I go to the farmer's market like twice a week. But if you're hot after pie cherries, you can access that data from your phone.
Does that actually take into account things like changing weather, droughts, or is it just kind of regional based, just assume certain things? Does it actually tie into, because there's a lot of real-time information kind of streaming out there that can tell you things like, well, they would be in season, but there's not very many of them, or the crops were all destroyed this year.
Yeah, it's not that fancy yet. Right now they're pulling in 2 data sets from the National Resources Defense Council on food availability and seasonality. And farmers market data from localharvest.org. Not there yet, but I'm very hopeful that these tools will get us to the point where they're taking into account the harvest, the specific harvest data, because that is being collected by government agencies. So we can see that there are more sour cherries this year than last year, and they're a little earlier. And they're sweeter, maybe.
And can that currently tie into maybe farmers who have those things available? So can you maybe tie those into marketplaces where it's beyond just it's available, but here's actually where you can go and get them?
Yes. Slicing from the other direction, this is targeted at a consumer market. There's a product now that's out and in beta called Farms Reach that is a producer to wholesaler app. And they're actually getting it to the point where they're working towards getting iPhones to farmers in the field so they can get orders live from restaurants, make sure that they fill the order, and if that small independent farmer isn't able to, they have less beans that week because there were bugs. They can work within the network of other small local farmers to still fill the order. Very real-time, very location-based, and tied into weather and sourcing through the whole supply chain.
So do you foresee, say, a run on certain types of materials or foods, right, where these are these things sustainable? I was talking to earlier, Josh Libney is a developer who developed an application called Land Summary, which actually does analysis to see are there enough farmlands around this area to support even if everyone went locavore, right? Or all of a sudden it would fall over.
Yeah, I haven't seen this tied in a tight way to time yet. But the American Farmland Trust is doing the food shed that I talked about. They did a report on the San Francisco food shed, and we're actually one of the few places in the country that could actually grow, and has in the past grown, all the food we need to support our immediate population.
And no one else is allowed to move here now.
Yeah, and the pasta imported from Italy, not grown here. Riffing on this good food everywhere you go idea, the Monterey Bay Aquarium has long had a program called Seafood Watch. You may have even now one of their Seafood Watch cards in your wallet. And they have initially just moved this very simply into an iPhone app and a mobile site. It's called Seafood Watch. And right now, they've kept the regionalization that they had in the paper version, so there are 6 versions, including Hawaii and Central and Northeast and Southeast. So there's 6 regionalized versions because a fish that's sustainable in California may not be as sustainable and rate as highly if you're eating it on the East Coast because it's traveled longer, it's from a different ecosystem, potentially. And there's also a sushi edition for you sushi lovers. They're taking this in some very interesting directions. The next version is going to add something that they could never add to the paper app, GPS, and a ranking so that you can sort it by, I want to eat fish tonight, here's what's in my region, the most sustainable types of fish. And I'm hoping that they take this in an even more crowdsourced. I would love to have an app on my phone that says there's 3 restaurants within 5 blocks that have fish in the top 10, and here's the ratings from them from Yelp. I think there's some very exciting potential there. you may have seen articles in the past in the New York Times about how the fish that's sold to you is not necessarily the fish. There's a lot of incorrect labeling. And I think as awareness increases about sustainable food and sustainable seafood, trust becomes an important part. So there's a very exciting opportunity here to be carrying around a sustainable seafood detecting device with crowdsourced data. I don't know if Monterey Bay Aquarium is going to take it that far, but I hope they do. And then the last one is a big stretch. I wanted to let you know about a database that's being built with a huge amount of integrity. It's called the Good Guide, and it's available as an iPhone app and a mobile app and a website. And the thinking behind this database is that in the United States, most of the food we consume comes from grocery stores, mainstream grocery stores. And if we had a directory and parents could make decisions between the 12 different kinds of macaroni and cheese in a box based on health factors, environmental factors, and the labor that went into producing the product, we'd all be in better shape. So right now, you can walk up with your phone and look at the 12 kinds and check on Good Guide and see, like, on these factors, oh, this is cool. But the other opportunity here, and it's very lightly regionalized just because meat and dairy products don't travel far. It's a regionalized food commodity in the US. I think there's a huge opportunity here to mash up this data set, and they're working right now on opening their API with where you are and how far the food has traveled. It happened first with boutique chocolate bars, as far as I know. There's a company called Taza that put a code on the back of their chocolate bar, and you could enter that code and go see, here's the farm it came from, here's the travel path of the cocoa beans, here's pictures of the day we processed it in the conking machines, and this is what it looked like, and you're eating the bar right now. And as of this week, last week, Frito-Lay is also doing a very light version of this on their packaging and getting into the local food movement.
Well, we were talking earlier that there was a Firefox extension last year called Corp Watch that you could do that. You go to any one web page and it would detect, okay, you're looking at Nestle's homepage, and here's all the things that we know about Nestle, the crowd is crowdsourced. And I wonder if now Corp Watch isn't around, but something like even like Get Satisfaction or other kind of public forums would be an interesting way for the crowd to kind of comment on those things outside of the corporations themselves, so they kind of have to respond and be responsible for what the public, at least perception or information gathering is.
And I think the big difference that's happening now is that there's an ethic around open APIs and being able to have large data sets that are created with integrity and open to MASH. And obviously the tech barriers are falling hugely in terms of just getting these databases access with ease into consumer hands at the point of your decision, like what kind of sushi do I want tonight? Should I get the eel? Wait, the eel's bad.
Yeah. So we're getting down, so probably move on to the next,
So focusing back on what the core of we're talking about today, where matters to us? How big is the where that matters to you? How do you see it changing? What does where mean to you now?
You know, one of the things that when we are able to access these databases in places that aren't our home, where you don't, I mean, theoretically, when we are at the, our mailing address, we should have some local knowledge, like we know what day the trash is picked up or where the grocery store is. But we are increasingly losing the local knowledge about seasonality and those kinds of things that Rachel was talking about earlier. But what is also interesting to me is this idea that even when I'm there, I'm impacting places that are far away from me. And so how can I use the kind of data sets that Rachel was talking about to be able to stand in a store and say, okay, maybe I know about what the local food is, but am I doing something with some of my other choices someplace else? So the Frito-Lay example sort of tells you where the potato came from, but tells you nothing about the packaging or the trucking or any of the. So the ability to drill down into that detail is mind-boggling, actually, in its breadth. And I think the other part of it then is layering on the idea of home, right? And the ability to tell stories and to be able to access other people's stories through these things.
Absolutely. For me, I'm I kind of end up geeking out on some of these tools, Foursquare, Brightcat, et cetera, and it almost feels like it's got more knowledge about where I've been than I do, and I'm able to look back on it. And so location becomes a very real proxy for almost emotional things in our life, like mood and time and other things, so that we can really map our personal history via location. It's sort of becoming the ultimate context, the ultimate contextual mapper.
So there's all these possibilities, but is it actually affecting on-the-ground change? I mean,
absolutely.
So you think people across the country and across the world, not just in technology or urban areas, are actually looking at these things and saying, well, I'm actually going to ask about the package I'm about to buy off the shelf, or what that impact is?
Right. Absolutely. And sort of to dovetail for a second, but Andrew, you worked on an amazing project, the Vote Report, which was all about location and all about helping your community figure out when was a good time to go vote and where was a good place to, not where, because you could only vote in one place, but when was a good time to go vote.
Well, also, where was that place to vote, which changed actually for a bunch of people.
Yeah, exactly. Those databases are not locked down until the last minute. But yeah, I mean, maybe you could even just talk about the Vote Report for a second.
Well, Dave Troy talked about it at the Ignite session. So
perfect.
I think, so we're getting kind of down towards the end. So I think really, I mean, you have this venue now of all these people. These are the people building kind of the next generation, current technology, the next generation technology, the thought leaders. What kind of recommendations do you give? I mean, we've talked a little bit what's successful, but what's necessary, what's needed both from a technology as well as bringing technology to people and having those kinds of feedback loops actually happen.
I'm really fascinated by the concept of the big here, originally from a Brian Eno thing. And I asked Stuart Brand this week, he hasn't responded to me yet, of the Long Now Foundation, where's the Big Here Foundation? Why didn't that happen yet? Do you need help? And one of the projects that I've been working on that I'm most excited about is with a client of ours, San Francisco Environment, partnering with Cisco and their Connected Cities project. Is anyone here from that? Shout out, awesome project. And the SF EcoMap is up, it launched, and it's launching, I think, today in Seoul. And it's a mapping project that's targeted at municipalities and digging down to the most granular level of actionable climate information you can kick out. So in San Francisco, they launched with a very light version, very big version of the data, and are going to be parsing it down into how are things changing on your garbage truck route. Are they going up? Are they going down? Are you doing a better job of not landfilling? What is your personal PG&E bill, your electric and gas bill? What are the changes happening there? What are the changes on your block? What are the changes in your zip code? And I love that it's happening in multiple cities, so you can see, oh, here's what's going on in Amsterdam, and here's what's going on in Seoul. Obviously, there are huge data problems here, and no one's going to be reporting on the same things, and it's not going to be granular enough for a while. But the idea of being able to see and control your impacts and see it on a global scale as well as on a micro local scale, I want that. If you could get to work on that, let me know what you need. I'll help.
Cool. You want to close up with anything else? Any other thoughts on giving on your venue to recommendation? I think definitely the global to the hyperlocal to the personal analytics to feeding back to the government, I think is definitely kind of, we need to kind of close that loop. All the things are opening up, but now tying them all back together.
I would just say go take a look at data.gov, which kind of opened its doors today. There's just so much data in terms of what's being collected.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and we'll definitely be available afterwards for any additional questions. So.